Welcome back to the What Do They Know podcast. Today, the guys are back together and ready to go over all the action from week 14, and boy, is there a lot. They'll go over their top stories and their power rankings, but they will also examine the AFC and NFC wildcard race and give you their predictions on who will lock those 3 playoff spots in each conference. But hey, what do they know?
What do they know? We are about to find out what's going on, everybody. This is the What Do They Know podcast. Nick and Jeff with you back together in full force, in full effect for this week. So thanks for bearing with us last week. We tried out some new technology, had to call last minute audible. Didn't exactly go great. So we're back in person together this week to get a good one in front of you guys, hopefully. So lot to go over from week 14. We got a lot of good stories, a lot of good talking points. Fantasy football stuff to go over. Playoffs start next week, so Make sure if you haven't paid attention to your team in the last few weeks, you start paying attention now.
This is where it counts.
Especially if you're in a money league.
Exactly.
So all right, so I will kick it off with our top stories this week. Got some good ones. I feel like, number one, and this is one of the few weeks where I feel like I'm not talking about like specific teams or specific games or something that happened, just topics in general. Mm-hmm. And the first one is just the value of a good backup quarterback.
Right.
So I wrote it down. 7 teams started their backup today.
7.
That's more than a fourth of the league.
Right.
And if of those 7 teams, 4 of them are playoff teams. So the Colts, the Browns, the Seahawks, and the Steelers. Now, the Seahawks, they lost today. They're not in the playoff picture after today. But going into today, they were.
Right.
So those 4 teams who are fighting for a playoff spot had to start a backup quarterback. Mm-hmm. And so I just feel like we've talked about it a lot throughout the season, especially being a Jet fan. I mean, you can't understate how important a good backup quarterback is.
Right.
I mean, look at the Browns, for example. They literally just pulled Joe Flacco out of the retirement home off the street, and he threw for, I wrote his stats down today, 311 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, he's looked amazing so far.
And we've talked, you were high on the Browns defense all season, and rightfully so. They have a phenomenal defense, but they have had nobody to throw the ball. Even when Deshaun Watson was in the game, he really didn't look anything special. Mm-hmm. So, if Flacco can continue to produce like this and they partner that with their defense, they're a scary-looking team.
Right. And so I actually have a friend of mine at work who's actually a Browns fan, and he's like, man, I feel more confident in having Flacco back there than Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Back when he was still healthy.
I don't blame him one bit.
Yep.
Flacco, and then the other guy I wrote down is Jake Browning from Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. They had a huge win Monday night against the Jags, and then they beat the Colts today. So that's huge for playoff implications for a tiebreaker perspective. He had 275 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. So the Bengals, who I immediately wrote off and said and left them for dead, they're right there.
Yeah, the first game that Jake Browning came in and he kind of put up a dud, to be honest with you, and you just thought, oh, well, that's it for them. It was Joe Burrow or bust there, but they went into their bye week, and I don't know if they adjusted their play calling to Browning's skill set, or Browning just adjusted to what he needed to do. So, but kudos to Jake Browning for for doing what he needed to do.
Yeah, I just feel like it's one of those things where you don't really need it until you need it. If that makes sense, like the QB depth chart is just something that people just gloss over every single season. Like, and you even joke about it, like, I have no idea who our backup quarterback is. Well, you need to start knowing, right? And GM's like, one of the biggest criticisms of the Jets GM this year, he's put together a great roster with a ton of talent, but he did not address the backup quarterback situation, and that's going to end up being their
Achilles heel.
Yeah, their Achilles heel this year.
Yeah, it's hard to account for injuries at any position, especially with the quarterback. You have 5 players who are designed to protect your quarterback in the offensive line, and then you have tight ends.
He missed on that spot too. So
when that goes, the whole rest of your roster is pretty much going to crumble if you don't address your offensive line accordingly. But it's just one of those things where you try to bulk up your offensive line. Quarterback, your season's probably going to hinge on your quarterback. But as we've seen with these teams that are in the playoff contention, it doesn't always have to revolve around your starting quarterback anymore. As long as you have a capable backup that can manage a game and maybe have a star-studded performance here and there, you're going to be right in the thick of it 100% of the time. So it's, and unfortunately for the Jets, I guess they didn't want to push Zach Wilson too far down the depth chart. But I mean, seeing how Joe Flacco is looking now, you kind of wonder if they had signed Joe Flacco as soon as Aaron Rodgers went down and they went that route. But I mean, it is what it is now. But yeah, there's absolutely no way you can undervalue a backup quarterback from now on.
Yeah, I agree completely. And then my second story, again, it's not specific team. It's more just a topic that I found super interesting today. There were 3 playoff teams that got what I would call significantly upset. Mm-hmm. So the Pats on Thursday, this was actually Thursday night, they beat the Steelers.
That surprised me.
2-win team.
Yep.
The Bears beat the Lions. Bears were a 4-win team. Mm-hmm. Lions, cream of the crop in the NFC. And then the Jets beat the Texans. Mm-hmm. And really gave it to the Texans. 30-6, I think the final score was. So those are 3 really surprising outcomes and are really going to, it's just making the playoff picture that much tighter mm-hmm. and much more exciting. I mean, you think about the Steelers. I mean, they have to be sick to their stomach. I mean, they were 7-4, and you look at that schedule. They got the 2-10 Cardinals coming in, and then the 2-10 Patriots after that. Yep. You got to be thinking you're moving to 9-4 easily.
You're basically securing your playoff spot at that point.
Correct. Yep. And then they go and they just lay an egg against both teams, and now they're 7-6, and who knows what's going to happen?
Right. I mean, they've got some AFC North opponents coming up now, so it's not going to be an easy road to get into the playoffs.
No.
They needed to take advantage of those 2 games that they just had with the Cardinals and the Patriots, and they did not at all. So yeah, that was my biggest shocker of this past week was the Patriots over the Steelers, because you would have thought Mike Tomlin would have had those guys ready, especially after coming off loss against the Cardinals.
Yeah,
but the Patriots just came out and I guess did what they needed to do. Bailey Zappi played a quarterback efficiently somehow.
Kudos to him.
So it was definitely the shocker for me, even more so than the Jets over the Texans, and especially more so than the Bears over the Lions, because I still with the Bears, I still feel like their offense still has potential. It just hasn't gone their way this year.
Yep, I agree.
Yep.
All right, what do you got for us?
So for me, I have the AFC playoff picture. There's just, let me count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams at 7-6 right now. Yep. They're all vying for 2 spots. Cleveland's has the number 1 wild card seed there at 8-5, so they're only a game ahead of all those teams.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of I guess conjecture there that you don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, you have Cleveland, the Steelers, and Cincy all there, but they're all in the AFC North, and we've talked about having AFC North having all their teams in there. But with that many teams in that hunt, I have a hard time seeing all of them making it, especially when they have to play each other.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to happen, but it's definitely going to be survival of the fittest here.
It's going to be fun, man. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's especially interesting when you look at, like, I don't know if this is a common sense statement or not, but it feels like it's not. A lot of these teams have played each other.
Yeah.
Like, you talk about tiebreakers, how big these matchups are, like Cincinnati over Buffalo, Houston over Denver, now Cincinnati over Indy. Like, all of these teams that are like 7-6,
right,
they all have played each other.
Right.
And so it's really, really interesting when you think of that. And now, the only reason you're positioned where you are is because of maybe a win that happened in week 3 that didn't look significant or didn't seem significant at the time.
Right.
And now it could be the difference between you making the playoffs or missing it by a game.
Right. Right now, the Bills are in 11th place. They're the last team of those.
And they might be the scariest of all of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's probably the number 1 team you do not want to face in the first round if you're in the top of the AFC rankings right there. So that to me is it's just so confusing, because you see all these teams and you think, I can see them going in. I can see them. They've deserved to go in. But at the same time, you look at Buffalo behind everybody else, and you look at Cincy, how they're playing right now. Those are the number 10 and number 11 seeds right now, but they're playing just as good as anybody else in the football league.
Yeah.
So it's going to be definitely a challenging final 3-4 weeks.
4 weeks.
4 weeks. So for Denver, Houston, Indy, and Pittsburgh, strap it up, because you got some really good teams chasing you.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
So, and then my second one is the NFC South, actually. So
Okay.
I've kind of like
unexpected.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've kind of gone away from
I wish
talking
the
about
Jets were in the NFC South. I really do. They'd be one game back, man.
Exactly. I mean, as a Saints fan, I feel like I try to go away from them, talking about them too much because I don't want to go on on tangents.
I get that.
on that. So, but I think
I'm not very good at doing that. Honestly, I'm not very good at doing that.
But it creates good media here.
Yeah.
So, but in my sense, I'm not going to be here for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to attend a wedding for my sister over in Mexico, so I won't be live. So this is how we end up getting together. But I'll go on a tangent for the Saints right now, just before I get off. So
please.
Yep. So right now they're tied for first place with the Buccaneers and Atlanta. Right now tiebreakers go to Tampa over Atlanta and the Saints. So for me personally,
they're 6-7, right?
They're all three of them are 6 and 7.
Yeah.
So it's it's such a joke right now. I feel like honestly, and I said this last year, I don't want the Saints to make the playoffs just to get bounced out anyway. I mean, the goal for every team, I feel like, is to win the Super Bowl. If you're just content making the playoffs, don't even make the playoffs. Get a high draft pick, restructure your roster, and go from there. But I don't want any hint or hope for Dennis Allen and Pete Carmichael Jr. to keep their jobs because of how, I guess, stagnant that offense can get, especially for a long duration of the games. And I guess the only hope you have of scoring points is maybe a 2-minute drill or something like that. That defense has carried them for long periods of time, but at the same time, they get tired. So they can only hold out for so long. It's just one of those things where you need to help out your roster where it needs, and a high draft pick will get you there. Last year, they didn't have they would have gotten the 10th overall pick, but they traded it away for, I can't remember who, but it went to the Eagles. And they drafted Jalen Carter, the defensive lineman, who's one of the, I guess,
he's a stud.
Yeah, he's
a stud.
He's probably going to win defensive player or rookie of the year or something, or at least in the conversation to do so. So it's just one of those things where I want the Saints to kind of reboot what they're doing, and move forward with the national plan with the top 10 draft pick, rather than, because last time they were drafting this high, they got Marshall Lattimore, and Marshall Lattimore has been a stud at a cornerback for when he's been healthy there. So to me, it's just one of those things where it's going to be convoluted. I don't see who's going to make it out of there, but whoever it is,
I still
feel
think
like
it's the Saints.
Yeah,
I do. And
they have the better roster.
They have the roster. They do. And like I texted you at one point today, they and I said this last week, they've given us zero reason to think that they're going to be there.
Right.
But they just have so much talent. Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave. I mean, Derek Carr, I don't know what happened to him. I don't think it's him. I think that it's the system,
right?
Which we kind of talked about off air. But like I texted you at one point today, he had, and this was like, I think in the third quarter or maybe even the fourth quarter. Going in the fourth quarter, he had 13 completions for like 37 yards.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? That's less than 3 yards of completion.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't even understand that.
Beats me.
I don't, like, what system is that? What offense is that? You know, I just, and so I still think they're going to be there. I mean, the tiebreakers, like we talked about in the AFC, they do not favor the Saints.
Right.
So they're going to have to pull some wins out of their butt.
Right.
But I don't know. I still think that talent will prevail.
Right.
And they'll be there at the end of the day.
Yeah, talent can only prevail if your coaching allows it. And I mean, their coaching has not allowed their talent to prevail this season. The Saints play Atlanta week 7 or week 18, I believe.
Ooh, that could very easily be
the deciding
division.
Yep, that could be definitely one of who goes to the playoffs at that point. But at the same time, it's going to be so hard for me to root against the Saints. But at the same time, I wouldn't be sad or devastated if they missed the playoffs entirely.
Well, and here's something else that we need to start talking about, right? I feel like when we talk about the NFC South, everybody just assumes the only way you're getting in is through winning the division. Right now, the last wild card team is Green Bay at 6-6. So
half a game.
It's not unrealistic,
right,
for two teams to get in at like 8 and 9.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so I think that could potentially be a real possibility.
Yeah, I mean, the way this division is kind of shaking out, you'll probably have at least two teams at 8-9. To be honest with you, whether the division winners 8-9 or 9-8, I don't know. But at this rate, the rate it's going, I personally, I'm having a hard time finding who would win the division, let alone having a second team in there.
Yeah.
But it's the NFC South is kind of a cluster right now, and I don't see. Honestly, I look at Tampa and Atlanta and the Saints and all of them. I don't see, I guess, any change or any good progression going on. You got Desmond Ridder in Atlanta. I'm not sure if he's a franchise quarterback. You got Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. And then Derek Carr, who's having his struggles this time.
Yeah,
I don't think any team in the NFC South right now is in a good position for their future, to be honest with you. And it's going to be probably this sort of way
for a few years. Yeah, I agree.
A losing division type of thing.
I agree.
Yep.
All right, so those are our top stories. We're going to do something a little different this week. We're not going to do any overreactions. What we are going to do is we are each going to take a conference. So Jeff's going to look at the AFC. I'm going to look at the NFC and just go over the wild card picture.
Okay.
And break out who we think, we'll obviously go over the standings as of right now, and who we think after week 18 is going to lock up those three wild card spots.
Right.
So I will let you go first with the AFC.
Okay. So I'm going to go over through like the entire 1 through 7.
Yep.
Currently.
Yep.
Baltimore right now is as the number 1 seed unlocked, 10-3. Miami's right behind them at 9-3. They play tomorrow, I believe.
Yep.
So
play Titans.
Titans. That's right. Yep. And then KC's at 8-5. Jacksonville's at 8-5 at 4. And then top 3 wild card seeds are Cleveland at 5 at 8-5. Steelers right now have the 6th seed at 7-6, and then Indy is has the number 7 seed right now at 7-6.
Those two teams play each other this week. I'm almost positive. Pittsburgh and Indy.
Do they?
I'm pretty sure.
Ooh.
Yeah.
There you go.
Talk about tiebreakers.
Exactly. So, but honestly, at the end of the day, from my perspective, I don't think either of those teams are going to make the playoffs, to be honest.
I agree completely.
Because in the hunt, you got Houston at 7-6, Denver at 7-6, Cincy at 7-6, and then the Bills at 7-6. Obviously, with tiebreakers, Cincy and the Bills are at the bottom of that trend. But at the same time, those two, like I said earlier, they're probably the two teams that are the most dangerous right now.
Yep. And Denver has a tiebreaker over Buffalo too. I just remembered that.
Yep. Denver does, and
so Buffalo
honestly,
really needs to win because they have like no tiebreakers.
Right. Honestly, I think best case for Buffalo right now is if Denver wins the division over KC,
which we didn't even talk about that.
Right.
We didn't even talk about that this week. That is, who would have thunk that the Denver Broncos could actually win the AFC West?
1-5.
They're 1 game back after the Chiefs lost today.
Yep. I mean, this was the year to do it because the Kansas City has not. They've lost all their wide receiver weapons. Tony has a job just by default. I feel because
that guy.
He is cost.
How do you? Okay, so I was texting my brother-in-law because he's obviously a diehard Bills fan. So we were talking about it a little bit after the game. I could be wrong with this, but I'm pretty sure that so you see wide receivers line up, and they always point. They're pointing at the ref.
Right.
They're not pointing at their guys on the sideline saying, "What's up, bro? Watch me on this play.
Watch this."
They're literally pointing at the ref saying, "Hey, am I good?" And and the ref flat out tells them yes or no.
Right.
How did he still line up offsides? How is that even a thing?
Honestly, when I heard the call, when I heard offsides, and then the ref said offense, it's like, excuse me?
Yeah.
It's not a call that's made often.
I don't know if I've ever heard it.
I heard it earlier this year, actually. Okay. I can't remember what game it was, but it was once, and that was the first time I had heard it in probably years or ever, to be honest with you. But I can't remember what game it was, but this is I know this is the second time I've heard it this season. But before that, I couldn't even tell you the last time I heard it. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I feel like Tony makes mental mistakes every single game, especially these close games where I guess everything is kind of looked through a microscope, where you're looking for a reason why they lost. Tony's usually the reason why Kansas City loses.
Yep.
I mean, obviously they don't have a lot of talent at the wide receiver position.
They don't.
So whether it's going to be Tony anyway or it's going to be somebody else, maybe Tony's just being at the wrong place at the wrong time type of thing. But I mean, there's only so much you can do and you can allow if you're Andy Reid. If Tony keeps costing you games every single time.
And not only that, from a bigger picture, like their receivers are so underperforming that it's gotten to a point where you can literally double or triple team Travis Kelce and say, let's take our chances with these other guys and make them make a play because they're going to drop the ball. They're going to hold. They're going to apparently line up offsides. Like by default, they have eliminated their own best weapon by not having other weapons around him.
Right. Yep. I've been low on Kansas City ever since the beginning of the season, and that's why I had opening game Detroit over KC. I just do not like their offensive roster construction. I know you have Mahomes and Kelce there, but I mean, if you shut down Kelce, all of a sudden, who do you have? As we said, there's nobody there. So they proved that with week 1, and it's just continued to prove itself as the season goes on. So Mahomes can only do so much, to be honest with you.
Well, so that's what I was just going to say next is I know on the surface his little outburst today was at the ref about the call.
Right.
That to me just screams like just utter frustration with the guys around him.
Oh yeah. You can't yell at them.
You can only he can only do so much. Yeah. And you can only do so much with the guys around you. And when it continues to just be a complete letdown like it has been,
right.
I mean, yeah, he might be frustrated. He's going to go back in and look at the replay and see like
the ref was right.
Correct. Yeah. The ref was correct.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, all this frustration grows and you let it out somewhere. Obviously, you don't want to direct it at your team, especially with the cameras on you.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's going to be a bad look. But honestly, yeah, you can probably make out that whole tantrum pointed more towards Tony than to that ref.
100%.
So, it's just a bad position for them. But yeah, Denver has all the possibility in the world to bypass KC. Obviously, they're a game behind, but I'm not sure who holds the tiebreaker on that. I feel
so they each won against each other.
Have they 1-1? Did they split that?
Let's look at their division records here. Stand by.
Yeah, because I'm actually interested in that because that'd be fun.
So Kansas City's 3-1 in the division. Denver's 2-2.
Oof.
So Kansas City has a tiebreaker on that.
Gotcha.
But there's more division games to be played.
Right.
You know what I mean? They don't play each other anymore, but I think Denver has the Chargers, and then Kansas City has the Raiders. So there's more division games to be played.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah, I have a hard time seeing Denver overtaking KC, but I think that would be really fun.
It would be fun.
It'd be such
so it's so funny because they were talking on the pregame of the Sunday night game like, oh, it's looking like Mahomes is going to have to play a road game for the first time in his career, thinking like second or third round.
Right.
Dude might not even get a home game at all if he continues like this.
Yep. I mean, I kind of had it like an overreaction earlier was where KC was going to get bounced in the first round. Honestly, the way they played today, I feel like it doesn't matter who they played. I think they're going to get trounced regardless of who they play, whether that's Denver, Houston, Steelers and Colts, maybe. But I think right now, especially those teams in the hunt right now, I think I'd probably give them the edge over KC right now. So, but yeah. And then over, who else? We got Jacksonville. That Jacksonville and Houston race is going to be tight. Obviously, CJ Stroud went out with a concussion.
They got really banged up today.
Yeah.
He went out. Nico Collins went out.
Yeah.
Will Anderson Jr. on the defensive end went out with an ankle injury. So the last couple weeks really have gotten depleted.
Right. I mean, Jacksonville does hold the tiebreaker over Houston because they won. I think they play one more time, but so that might be a big game. But I think Jacksonville holds off on that. But for my prediction, I got Cleveland at 5.
Yep.
So I'm keeping them there. I just think they're the better team out of all these teams in the hunt.
Yep.
Denver.
Yep.
I got them at 6 because I feel like they have an easy schedule.
Yep.
And then 7, I just have a hard time leaving the Bills out, to be honest with you. And besides, they're my Super Bowl prediction. So I kind of had to sneak them in there, even though I like Cincy and I like Houston. But the Steelers and Colts are probably my first 2 out. Just like they're kind of like no-brainers to me because they just don't have the staying power right now.
I agree.
So, but the Bills, I feel like they know they have to turn on the Jets right now, and they kind of did.
Every game is a playoff game.
Yep, and they will be the scariest 7 seed that in recent memory, to be honest with you.
So this wasn't part of the segment, but I had also picked the AFC to tell you who you got wrong. And I picked the exact same 3 in the exact same order.
Look at that.
Yeah. Cleveland, Denver, and Buffalo.
Look at that. Same page right there.
Yep. One brain. Which I know podcasts we're supposed to argue and stuff, but
Yeah, there are times where we actually agree on stuff.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So for the NFC, right now, as it stands, Dallas is at 9-3. They're the 5 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota's at 7-6. And then Green Bay is 6-6. They play tomorrow. They play the Giants.
Okay.
And then same thing. There's a ton of teams tied with the same record. The Rams, the Seahawks, Atlanta, New Orleans are all 6-7. And then Chicago, who I'm going to throw in there because it's only 2 games back at this point.
Look, they're talking about the NFC playoff
picture
right now.
Gosh, we're on it, man.
We're on it.
Because hypothetically, let's just say Green Bay loses tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That puts them at 6-7. So the last wild card spot will have a 6-7 record. Chicago will only be 1 game back.
Right.
Which that would be, don't even get me started there. That would be absolutely stunning if Chicago somehow got in. So I look at Dallas. I almost put Dallas in the division race because, as it stands right now, they're up 17-6 against the Eagles. So hypothetically, if they win this game, they'll both be 10-2. So the division is very realistic.
10-3. Yep.
But when I look at their remaining schedules,
mm-hmm.
Phillies is a cakewalk in comparison to Dallas. Dallas has
Buffalo now.
They have the Dolphins. They have the Ravens. So they have a gauntlet. 3 out of the last 4 games.
Right.
So that's why I have my the Cowboys still ending up in that 5 seed.
Yeah, understandable.
And then I have Green Bay at 6.
Green Bay.
I think I'm on the Green Bay train. I think they've figured it out.
Yeah, they turned it on.
I think they're going to win tomorrow to go to 7-6,
mm-hmm.
and then they have who do they have? They have Tampa Bay next week.
Mm-hmm.
So Tampa Bay, hot weather team playing in a very cold weather environment. So I think that's going to be a win. I just think they've figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Love looks completely in control of that offense.
Right.
And he has weapons around him. If Aaron Jones comes back, my goodness, him and is it Corey Dillon? No, Corey Dillon's the dad. AJ Dillon.
AJ
Dillon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good running back tandem.
It is a very good running back tandem. And then you got Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, the little speedster Jalen Reed.
Right.
They have a lot of weapons.
Yeah, Reed's kind of come into carved out his own role there.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the biggest things for them is Matt LaFleur has found ways to use him,
mm-hmm.
and it's kind of it seems like it sparked everything else.
Right. Everything else, I guess, evolved around Jalen Reed after that because Watkins has turned it on. Dobbs is
he's just consistent.
He's kind of been like the red zone target right there.
Yep.
So yeah, they're figuring it out over there in Green Bay.
Yep. So I have them at 6, and then the 7 seed I have squeaking in is the Los Angeles Rams.
Ooh.
They're 6-7 right now. They're just on the outskirts looking in. They took Baltimore to overtime today,
mm-hmm.
and obviously lost on the walk-off punt return.
Mm-hmm.
But they and talk about teams coming out of nowhere. You and I just bashed them in our preseason breakdowns of our divisions, basically saying pack it in for next year sort of thing.
Yeah, they were like in no man's land, and because you have Stafford, you had Kupp and Aaron Donald, so it's not like you want to go full rebuild, but obviously you have to go young somewhere.
Yeah.
So they were at a crossroads. I felt like.
Obviously nobody knew about Puka Nacua showing up. What's Kyron Williams is a running back. He's turned into a force.
Mm-hmm.
And Stafford is just Matt Stafford. He's just still, he's the old guy now, but he's still making plays.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if he can stay healthy, if they can stay healthy the last 4 weeks, and he cannot, force the ball,
right? I
think that they are going to, they're going to squeak in. I really do.
Yeah, a lot hinges on the health of those 2 receivers, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Obviously, Cooper Kupp was injured during the first 5-6 game handful of games. So Puka kind of carved out a role for himself there, but now they have 2 really, I guess, studded, certified studs right there at wide receiver. So, and like you said, Kyron Williams has done a phenomenal job there at the running back position. So, they have the offense to make it to the playoffs. It's just about being consistent there, because I feel like that's what they lack right now.
So the Rams' remaining 4 games, they're home against the Commanders.
Okay.
They're home against the Saints.
Okay.
They're at the Giants and then at the Niners.
Ooh.
So me personally, when I look at those 4 games, I think they'll win the next 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll probably lose to the Niners. Who knows? They might even beat depending on where the Niners are at last week of the season. If they have everything packed away,
Locked up.
who knows? So they could. I feel very confident that they'll be 3-1 or 4-0,
Mm-hmm.
which will put them at 9-8 or 10-7. And
Okay.
I think in the NFC, that's 1,000% getting in the division.
Yeah, 10 wins for sure.
Yeah.
10 wins for sure.
Yeah.
9 wins, you have a good chance.
Yep.
It just depends on tiebreakers at that point, I
Yep.
feel like.
So that's who I got: Dallas, Green Bay, and the Rams.
Okay. Yeah, that's not a bad 3 at all.
No,
Oh.
and it's not. I would have never picked Green Bay at the beginning of the season. I would have never picked the Rams at the beginning of the season. So,
Nope.
and I mean, same with Cleveland and Denver. I wouldn't have predicted them at the beginning of the season either. So that's what's so good about football, man, is you
Mhm.
just never know. Like, we can
Right.
sit here and act like the smartest people in the world,
Right.
but at the end of the day, like, there's a good chance we're gonna be wrong about the majority of the stuff that we're talking about, just because football is so unpredictable.
Right. Yeah. You can play by the stats all you want, all the numbers, and try to make sense of it as much as you want. But at the same time, these are people playing the games, and all sorts of factors go in: coaching decisions,
Yeah.
X, Y's, and Z's. Injuries happen. All these things culminate to produce what we enjoy watching every week in and week out.
Yeah.
So it's always exciting to see, especially
And-
things like Denver
Yeah.
coming in.
Well, I mean, Chris Berman, he said it best years ago, right? That's why they play the game,
Right,
because
exactly.
you just never know.
Right.
You just never know what's going to happen.
Right.
So awesome. All right. So we are just going to wrap up the actual football side of things with doing our power rankings real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I really struggled this week because when you look at my rankings last week, I had
Let's see what you have.
so Lions lost,
Right.
Chiefs lost,
Okay.
Eagles are getting crushed right now,
Right.
and I guess that's it. 49ers won, Ravens won, but like three of my top 5,
Mhm.
not feeling too great about.
Right.
And I even kept, obviously we did this prior to this Sunday night game starting.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept the Eagles in there, and I'm really not feeling good about that right now. So
Yeah.
I'll just kick off with what I have. So
Okay.
49ers stayed at 1,
Right.
right? That's no surprise. They just
Right.
continue to be dominant.
Right.
I have the Ravens jumping up in mine to number 2. They win every which way. They've shown that they can score.
Mhm.
They've shown that they can just be completely dominant on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And now, they win with special teams. So
Right.
they're doing it every which way. I got the Eagles. I kept them right where they were at 3. Not
Okay.
feeling too great about that right now.
Kind of drop a little bit.
I got Miami at 4.
Okay.
I've come off the Miami bandwagon like in a big way.
Right.
I'm not sold on them. They need to win against a good team.
Good team. Right.
And I just don't see that happening.
Right.
Their next 3 games will be very, very telling. So I'm excited to watch that. And then I have Detroit. Even though they lost, I still have Detroit in the top 5. I still think that they're a good team, a really good team, not
Right.
just a good team.
I just.
But I don't like, besides the Niners and I guess maybe the Ravens,
Right.
none of these teams I'm like, yup, like they
And
are
that's it.
they are legit.
Yeah, it's always a toss up after those. Like for me, even the Ravens was a toss up last week. I put
Yeah.
them at 2 just because of their dominant performances over the Seahawks when they were still playing well, and the Lions, who obviously they're I guess up there in the echelon of the NFC right now. But the Lions, I feel like they're still getting used to winning. Then they haven't had a culture of winning for a while.
Yeah.
So I think they're so on and off and hot and cold that sometimes you don't know. Like obviously last week started off against the Saints 21-0, and then the Saints made it a game somehow. And then this week they kind of lay a goose egg and end up losing. But so for me, I actually have the Niners going 1, Ravens 2.
Yep.
I have the Dolphins at 3. I've obviously I'm on your ship. I want to see them against a good team.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that offense is really prolific, and I feel like since the run game is really producing the way it should be, especially, and that matters, especially in playoff football and cold weather situations. So I got the Dolphins at 3, Eagles at 4, which they might get supplanted by the Cowboys at this point.
Yeah.
And then 5, I actually got the Browns going in at 5.
I thought about the Browns.
Did you?
I did. I didn't want to be one of those like overreact. Like that could very easily be an overreaction, very easily, and that's why I didn't do it.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
golly, Dallas just scored again.
Yeah, 23-6.
It's about to be 24-6.
Yep. So,
holy smokes!
With the Browns, obviously, I've been high on their defense the entire thing, and Joe Flacco's just coming in and kind of like taking charge, especially this week, most of the last week because it was like his first game playing for the Browns. But this week, he over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. At that point, you kind of have a flow for the offense at that point, and I feel like if their offense can match their defense, they're going to be a scary team in the playoffs.
Yep.
So that's where I have them.
Yep. Okay. All right. So we will transition to our fantasy football segment, and we will go with studs and duds. This was the last week before the playoffs, so we'll talk about that in just a minute. But
okay.
Quarterback studs, Lamar Jackson, 31.6 points. He had 316 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 70 rushing yards.
70 rushing yards.
So that'll always help when your quarterback gets 70 rushing yards.
Right.
Desmond Ridder, surprise stud appearance on the studs and duds list. He had 25 points. They were 1 and 2 in quarterback scoring this week. So,
really?
Yeah. 25 points. He had 347 yards and 1 passing and 1 rushing touchdown.
Okay.
So, they got the L this week, but
right. I wonder how much of that was because the Bucks were ahead for majority.
Yeah, that could have very easily been game script.
Right.
Running back, a very rare appearance from Ezekiel Elliott. He scored the most out of all running backs this week with 27 points. He had 68 rushing yards, 72 receiving yards on 7 catches. So if you're in a PPR league, that's money.
You feasted.
And a rushing touchdown.
Feed Zeke.
So yeah, it's funny. My shout out to my brother-in-law, Justin. He's like, I picked him up this week and I sat him on my bench, which, that's just such a punch right in the stomach when that happens.
Stevenson was out, right?
He was out.
Yeah.
He was out.
So,
Yep. It's so funny. Side note. So like all this week, I was like scrounging the waiver wire because we're in a 14-team league.
Right.
So the waiver wire is like basically guys who are like on IR.
Right.
That you've never heard of. And so I knew Demario Douglas was going to be out. I knew Devontae Parker was going to be out. So I'm like, okay, who's going to be the guy for the Patriots?
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't end up doing anything. And then I go and I look Friday because I fell asleep during the Thursday night game, honestly. And I forgot I had freaking Hunter Henry on my bench.
Ooh.
And he ended up having
the game.
He was the guy. Yeah, so he was on my team the whole time. So that really...
He was on my team.
He was on my team the whole time. I had him. Didn't even need to pick him up. He was sitting right there on my bench.
All you had to do was just...
Yep.
Click.
It didn't even... Because you immediately go to like, okay, running back or receiver. Like you don't go to tight end.
Right.
So like it didn't even register. And I looked the next day. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So don't do that, people.
Yeah, look at your bench before you look at the waiver wire.
Yep. All right, we just got a huge tangent. So second running back, and I'm very, very pleased with this one. Breece Hall, 26.6 points. He had 40 rushing yards.
Mm-hmm.
He had 8 catches, 86 yards, and a receiving touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
So he had a great game. He had like 126 total yards.
Yeah.
He, finally was part of the offense. Zach Wilson put him in a good spot today.
Mm-hmm.
Offense looked,
sound
like a team. Like I didn't recognize.
I didn't
recognize that offense today. So that was a pleasant surprise. All right, wide receivers. Deebo Samuel. He continues to put up massive numbers. I think 3 weeks in a row he has multiple touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So he had 34 points. He had 2 a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown. 7 catches, 149 yards, just blowing up. So he's, perfect timing because he's on one of my money league teams. So I'm really hoping that carries over into the playoffs.
Right.
And then Drake London, you pair him with Desmond Ridder. They both had phenomenal games. He had 29.2 points, 10 catches, 172 total yards.
Yep. I started him over Olave today.
Did you?
League. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Yep.
Very good call. And we had 2 great tight end performances. 2 guys that I really feel like should be on this list every week. Evan Ingram and David Njoku. Ingram had 32.5 points. He had 11 catches, 95 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Njoku, also 2 touchdowns, 6 catches, 91 yards. So both of them had phenomenal games. Njoku is one of those guys that I really feel like is undervalued, underutilized. Like he's an athletic freak.
I feel like Joe Flacco is probably the best thing for him because Flacco had Mark Andrews,
the tight ends.
Yep, he loves tight ends. He had Mark Andrews there in Baltimore. Deshaun Watson. I mean, if you look back at his Houston days, I don't think he ever really threw to the tight end that much. So I think the biggest beneficiary is definitely going to be Njoku in that new Cleveland offense.
Yep. And then the defenses, the Saints, 18 points. They had 2 fumble recoveries, 4 sacks, and then a defensive touchdown.
Yeah, block punt.
Yep, block punt. So that always helps. And then the Vikings, they shut out the Raiders today in just the most boring game of the day, 3-0. And that 3 points was like at the 2-minute warning of the fourth quarter. So there was just zero offense to speak of all day.
Yeah, they scored that field goal with like 1:57 left in the clock or something. I wonder when the last time a 3-0 game happened.
Couldn't even tell you. Fun fact, if you shut out a team on fantasy football, you get 5 extra points.
Ooh.
So they got 5 points for that. So they had 17 total points. They had an interception, 2 fumbles, 4 sacks, and then they got the boost for shutting out. Who'd they play? The Raiders.
The Raiders.
Yep. So those are the studs this week.
Nice. Okay. Well, I got the duds this week. So, I mean, obviously it hurts to see some of these names on here, but CJ Stroud, obviously he went out injured, but he made it through.
But he played enough of the game
he played,
where the sample size was large enough. I mean, the Jets defense, I'm on record how good they are. Right. They made him look, I mean, it was raining, but Zach Wilson played great in the rain.
Right.
So they made him look really pedestrian today.
Right. So he went 10 for 23, but only 91 yards. So he went out what in the fourth quarter?
I want to say there was like 7 or 8 minutes left in the game.
Yeah. So in the fourth quarter somewhere. So he had enough of a sample size to get you points, but he did not. Jared Goff, he threw 35 times, but only completed 20 of them for 161 yards. He had 1 TD and 2 INTs. I think he ended up with like something in the 6 point to 7 point range.
Yep.
So obviously, if you recall, I traded for Jared Goff earlier from Nick. So that's probably why he's dudding right now. Running back, Gus Edwards. He's kind of being phased out of that Baltimore offense, I feel like.
Agreed.
So, and this will probably be the last week I put him on here.
Who do they have? Like I know they got the Mitchell. Yep. He's a rookie. And then who else?
It's literally just Mitchell and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson had 11 attempts today for the 70 yards that he had.
Yeah.
So Mitchell actually had more carries than Gus Edwards, and which surprises me because Gus Edwards for that short time before Mitchell kind of made a name for himself, Edwards was doing his job. I feel like he was,
and he's a touchdown machine.
He was carrying the ball into the end zone in the red zone, so he's doing what he needed to do. But it's just about, I guess, being explosive, and he just wasn't explosive enough.
Yep.
So that's him. And then Alexander Madison. I felt like a lot of us, I guess, predicted him to be the lead back to kind of take charge now that Dalvin Cook wasn't in Minnesota, but he's just been a disappointment, I feel like, all year.
Yep.
He only had 10 attempts for 66 yards. I think he got out-attempted by some other running back. There you go, Ty Chandler. Yep. That's exactly what it was. Yep. So it's just one of those things where this is just rounding out a disappointing season for Madison and anybody who drafted him.
Yep.
Wide receiver, Gabe Davis, 2 targets, no receptions. So you got 0 points. Even I saw him streaking down the seam for an open touchdown, but pressure kind of got Josh Allen before you could see him. But obviously, Buffalo and KC matchups usually produce a lot of points.
I was just going to say that. It was a very defensive game today, and it's not typically how they go.
Yep. So if you kind of predicted a high-scoring affair,
I would have taken the over.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like Gabe Davis kind of has his best games against KC.
Yeah.
If you remember that playoff game, last year, 2 years ago?
2 years ago, 3 years ago,
I think he had like 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
Yep. So, I mean, it's a little disappointing to see 0 receptions there. Mike Evans, he only had 1 reception for 8 yards.
I was playing him today, so I'm totally good with that.
Way to go.
Thank you.
So, but yeah, I mean, he's the number 1 target there, but yeah, it's disappointing stat line for that one. And then Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson kind of went out with an injury, I think, in the second quarter.
Yep.
Pretty early on. Addison, but I mean, whether it's his fault or not, I don't know if it's just Dobbs kind of playing like Dobbs. It's
been since Dobbs came in.
Yeah.
Because he was one of those. So I have Jordan Addison in 2 of my leagues. And when Kirk Cousins was in the game, he was a must start.
Oh, yeah.
He was like my number 1, number 2 wide receiver. And since Dobbs came over, he's been like non-factor.
Non-existent.
Yeah, non-factor.
Yep. So I mean, he'll be the de facto number one receiver there. If Justin Jefferson misses some time, I know he got hospitalized today.
I didn't see that. Did he?
For his chest? He did. Yep, for his chest. But yeah, I would not trust Addison right now, especially with Dobbs there. Tight end Sam Laporta, 2 receptions for 23 yards. Kind of disappointing coming off a 9-catch, 140-yard and a TD performance last week against the Saints. But so I mean, you'll have ups and downs, especially if you're a rookie. But it's kind of hard to see that low of a production after a high week like that. And then defensively, I put the Steelers here. Nobody got negative points this week, but I put the Steelers because they're playing the Patriots, who were just not doing anything on offense for forever or all season. But they had an INT, 2 sacks, but they allowed 21 points to probably, I'm assuming, the last ranked offense in the league.
Yeah.
So, the Steelers on that one. So,
yep, that's fair.
Yep, that's it for me on duds.
All right. So, if depending on your format of your league, I think in 2 of our leagues we have playoffs starting next week, or maybe even all 3 of them.
I'd have to look. But...
They all, so playoffs start next week.
Mm-hmm.
So now's the time to look at your matchups. Also, fun fact, public service announcement: there's 3 games on Saturday.
Oh,
so if you're one of those guys that wait until Sunday at 12:45 to do your lineup, like this guy,
that's me.
Don't do that this week because there's obviously the Thursday night game, like there always is,
right?
And then there's literally a triple header on Saturday.
Yeah, usually 1
o'clock, 4:30, and then I think 8:30 game on Saturday. So that could really screw you over if you don't do your lineups before Saturday.
All right. I usually check if I have anybody in the Thursday night game. If I don't, I got till Sunday.
Yep.
I'll check it Sunday morning. Who's in, who's out,
yep.
Injuries, all that stuff. Nope, don't do it this week. Saturday.
I feel like this. You pretty much know how you're going to do, right? Like like I have one league where I feel like my team is just taking off at the perfect time.
Mm-hmm.
Like the league that I have Deebo Samuel in is a huge part of that. But then I have another league where like I was like 8-2, and now I'm about to go like 8-5 or 8-6.
Ooh.
Like I've just lost like 4 in a row. I'm going to make the playoffs, but I have like no flow and no structure, and like there's no guys that I'm like immediately penciling in every single week.
I feel like you kind of lose your confidence.
Correct.
Like in that
you question yourself.
Yeah. Like
you question yourself.
Like it's playoff time. I need to make the right decisions.
I need to figure out who I'm starting. Whereas like if you have that flow, you have guys that are just producing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very easy decision.
Right.
But I mean, you really gotta. I mean, I feel like now is where you gotta look at weather. Look at like, are they playing in a dome? Are they playing at
outside.
Lambeau? Are they going to get 4 feet of snow? Are they playing in Miami or Jacksonville?
Right.
All of those things are like, because it's do or die.
Mm-hmm.
I know some ESPN leagues are 2 weeks cumulative. I think ours are single elimination.
It's single.
So
single
there's no room for error.
Nope.
You can't make up for it in week 2. So.
Right.
This is tons of fun. I mean, we invest hours every week into it, or at least I do.
Right.
Constantly looking at the waiver wire, constantly looking at matchups.
Yeah, I look every Tuesday because I'm a night shifter. So Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, when I get out, I get home. The first thing I do is see waivers, who claimed who, or if I can put it in the last second waiver, I do that.
Yep.
So that's where I kind of make my money there. And then after that, it's not until probably Thursday or Sunday.
So the first thing I do Wednesday morning, so obviously I'll do the same thing. I'll put in claims or whatever, but Wednesday morning, I don't look at my claims. I look at who other people dropped.
Right.
Because like you're always, if you pay attention, you're always going to, so in like one of our leagues, like the second or third week, somebody dropped DeAndre Swift. I picked him up.
That's probably me.
Maybe you. Thank you. In one of our leagues this week, somebody dropped Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah.
And I picked him up. And he got me like 13 points this week.
Yeah.
I think like if you pay attention, people like in 2 of our leagues, because of the bye, somebody dropped San Francisco's defense.
Ooh, yep.
And I picked them up in both of those leagues.
Yep.
So like you can really make someone else's bad decision you reap your benefits.
Right, yeah, especially early in the season where you don't know who's going to produce. Obviously, DeAndre Swift, I think he got out-touched by whoever it was.
The first week, he got like nothing.
Yeah, he got nothing. I was like, okay, I guess we know who the lead back is there.
I just took a flyer on him. I'm like, I'll stash him away and see what happens.
Yeah, for me, I was like, I know who's going to have the lead back duties there.
Yep.
Nope.
Jokes on you.
Flip the script on me.
Yep.
So I think I can't remember what I needed to grab off the waiver wire when I dropped them, but it's just one of those.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, I know I dropped them in one league.
Thanks,
I don't know if it's the same league you picked them up in, but Yeah, it's just definitely one of those things where you have to look at. Obviously, some people are crunched with roster space and buys and whatnot. So there's some tough decisions that other managers have to make, and it's about you taking advantage of what they make.
Also, did you see what I did?
No.
In our 14-team league?
No.
Did you see what I did?
No.
Who I stashed away on IR just in case?
Who?
Aaron Rodgers.
Did you really?
I did. Picked him up, put him straight on IR. Why not?
Man.
I got Kyler Murray as my starter right now. He's on bye this week, so I had to go with Derek Carr, who was just a clunker.
Right.
You never know. Sounds like he's not going to play this week against Miami, but his goal all along allegedly was Christmas Eve against Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Who knows?
You never know. So I picked him up. I stashed him away. We'll see what happens.
It would be risky.
I know.
Because...
I know. I'd almost want to watch him 1 week to see how he does and then start him the next week. But...
What
we have 3 weeks of playoffs.
Right. So is that semifinals when he comes back?
Yeah.
If he comes back, his target
semifinals.
Date? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's rough.
Can you, there. Can you imagine? I'm either going to be like a genius or the biggest idiot in the world. Blows out his other Achilles. Oh God. All right.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I did that. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
More to come on that.
Yep.
All right, so that's our fantasy football perspective. I don't know if we're going to do this next week because it'll be playoffs. Maybe we will. So more to come on that. What to watch for next week. So again, we're picking a game to preview and kind of get excited for. So mine is one of the Saturday games. It's actually the night game at 8:30. Broncos at Lions.
Broncos at Lions. The Broncos rolling in hot a little bit.
Correct.
Lions
coming up and down. 7-6 at 9-4. We already talked about earlier in the show how the Broncos now have a very realistic shot at winning the division.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched them, man, like I had them on the multi-view for the late games on the NFL ticket. So I had an eye on them. I was obviously paying most attention to the Bills and Chiefs, but the Broncos, their offense, Russell Wilson just looks in complete control.
Right.
They're doing all these naked bootlegs. They had a bootleg where a guy was just literally wide open in the end zone, nobody within 10 yards of them. Their defense is playing great. Obviously, Herbert went out today, so that helped because they were playing the Chargers.
Mm-hmm.
But they look completely different from the beginning of the season.
I mean, I think it's the Sean Payton effect type of thing because I know his offense is, I guess, a little bit more intricate and complicated than most offenses are. And I mean, as a Saints fan, you'd always hear it.
Yeah.
Drew Brees would picked up on it really quickly.
Yep.
So Russell Wilson, he's always been, I guess, adaptable because he of his legs. He can do whatever he basically wants on the scramble. So it's fun to see him kind of like make that offense his own because he's not the Drew Brees. He doesn't have, I guess, the accuracy that he makes his money getting out of the pocket.
Yep. The off-schedule plays.
The off-schedule plays, finding somebody running wide open or making a tight throw somewhere. He's a really good quarterback when it comes to not doing the quarterback play, to be honest with you. So
the oh no. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what he's made his name for.
Yep.
So for me, Sean Payton kind of came in. He got a feel for his players, where they're all at, especially coming off last season where Denver was. And I feel like maybe some players got a little bit too comfortable in their roles and not executing the way they should be.
Yep.
And I mean, kudos to Sean Payton for turning that season around quickly.
Yeah.
It didn't take a year. Didn't take hardly any time at all. Half a year.
6 games.
Yep. 1-5,
games,
and then 5 in a row after that. Yeah, it's just one of those things where that's where your head coach comes in, and that's where your first round draft pick that they traded away, you realize that that was worth it.
Yep.
So yeah, that'll be a fascinating game for sure.
And on the other side of that, this. I mean, you could very easily say this is kind of a prove it game for the Lions because you think about their last 3 weeks. Thanksgiving they lost to the Packers. Last week they beat the Saints, but they
almost let it go.
They almost blew it.
Yeah, they almost let it go.
And then today, obviously, they lost to the Bears. So they are out of sync, I think it's fair to say.
Right.
And they're playing a hot team right now. So I'm actually really, really curious and excited to watch that game. I think the Lions are favored -4.
Are they?
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there.
Perfect. So for mine, I actually got the Bills again against the Cowboys.
Yep.
So obviously the Bills are still fighting for their playoff lives. Obviously, as we talked earlier, they're the last seeded team there of the teams in the hunt. So they're coming in kind of in a must-win game. I know it's not a conference game, so tiebreaker doesn't have as much of an effect there, but still a win is a win here.
Yeah.
And you need the wins to pile up, especially at 7-6. So you do not want to end up back at 500, especially with all those teams ahead of you. So obviously the Cowboys, as we're seeing right now, they're kind of stomping the Eagles right now.
Yep,
they're stomping the Eagles right now in Dallas. So it'll be interesting to see if this offense and this defense can travel. Well, the defense for sure, but this offense can travel to Buffalo to face a team that kind of like slowed down the KC offense. I mean, the KC offense hasn't been, I guess, an output that you're going to write home about, but at the same time, it's still Mahomes and Kelsey. So yeah, that'll be my matchup for next week.
Yeah, I'm excited about that game. The Bills just they have no break. Right. They have the Eagles, and then
it's full throttle.
They have the Chiefs, and then they have the Cowboys, who obviously, like we said, they look dominant right now. So that'll be a really, really good game.
Right.
I think that's the 4:25 game on Fox next week.
Yep. It's same game, same time slot they had this week against the Chiefs.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. I was commenting on you. With the exception of that game, I think the best matchups next week are all on Saturday.
Right.
Because the first game is, I'm going to pull it up because I want to make sure I get it right.
Right.
The first game is, let's see here, Vikings and Bengals. So both 7-6, both fighting for a playoff spot.
Right.
Steelers Colts is the second game. Again, both 7-6. So you're talking about the 6 and 7 seed right now.
Yep.
And then Broncos Lions. So 3 really good games.
All playoff
on Saturday.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, the NFL picked those matchups perfectly to have on the Saturday games.
Right.
So looking forward to sitting on my couch all day Saturday. No, that's not realistic.
Right.
But yeah, awesome. So we'll finish off the show with our picks. Just recap what we did last week. So I was 1-1 last week. I tell you, even when the Jets win, they just find a way to screw me. Every week, man. It's just,
they heard you.
I picked, so breaking news, the Jets listened to the podcast.
Yeah.
Confirmed.
This is confirmed.
And so bulletin board material for them. Because I picked the Texans as my lock.
Yeah, you were like, oh, they don't have to worry about anything.
I was about as sure could be
Yep.
that the Texans were going to win today.
Yep.
And the Jets, I mean, they scored 30 on them.
Never would have thought that was possible for the Jets.
No,
to be
not
honest
only
with
that, but I did not think they were going to hold them to 6 points.
Right.
So, I mean, who knows? I'm just so done with them. But watch out, they're going to win out. Go 9-8.
That's right.
So I had the Texans as my lock. That didn't work out.
Right.
And then I picked the Broncos over the Chargers as my upset. That did work out. So 1-1, 13-8 overall. Jeff, you also missed on your lock. You picked the Colts over the Bengals.
Yeah. I got nervous after seeing the Bengals on Monday night.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what?
I'm sure you did.
I think I made a wrong call on that one.
But prior to that game, there was no reason to think that was going to happen.
Right.
So
can't
fault you there. And then your upset did land barely. Bucks over the Falcons. That was like a last minute drive, I think, for the Bucks.
Yep.
So we were both 1-1. Both moved to 13-8. 13-8, 13-9. 13, I don't know, whatever. 13-9.
13-9.
So I will go with mine. My picks.
Okay.
So my lock is the Packers over the Bucks.
Okay.
I'm high on the Packers. This could be exactly the same as you. If the Packers go lay an egg on Monday Night Football tomorrow, then who knows?
Yep.
But right now, I like that matchup. Packers over the Bucks, and then my upset is a game that we've talked a lot about, and I have the Broncos over the Lions.
Okay.
Lions are -4.
Right. Okay, that's not a bad pick at all. So for me, I got my lock. I got the Bengals over the Vikings right now. So I'm flipping the script.
I almost took that one because the Vikings look so horrible offensively today.
Yep. Yeah. At this point, Dobbs, I don't trust him. Ever since he played the Saints, lo and behold, the Saints. So ever since he played there, he's just not looked I guess the Dobbs of what we've seen in
That's
Arizona.
Very reasonable pick.
Yep. So the Bengals over the Vikings, and then my upset. I actually have the Panthers winning their second game of the season on this one. Panthers, the Falcons. So I know it's a little risky, but I'm going for it
over Falcons. Okay.
Yep.
What's the line there? Why did you not take the Tennessee line?
Because I don't know if CJ Stroud's playing. And Davis Mills is what?
Yeah, I think
went 1 for 5.
Yeah, well,
yeah, he didn't look too hot there. So let me see. -3 for the Falcons.
-3. All right. I like it. That's a bold pick. Did AJ Brown just fumble?
I think he did.
Golly, the Dallas is just
laying it on.
It's funny. We talked about it right last week. Dallas is playing Philly at the perfect time for how the two teams are playing. Mm-hmm. Dallas is playing phenomenal, and that's definitely a fumble, 1,000%.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I said, it could have been a wake up call for the Philadelphia last week when they lost, but so far that whole dreadful play that they've been, I guess, escaping from with wins with Buffalo against Buffalo and whatnot, it's carried on, and at this point, I feel like it's more identity at this point than it is just a funk. And honestly, if you're a Philadelphia fan, I'd be a little scared right now.
100%.
To be honest with you,
100%.
So,
yep. All right. That's our show. Jeff is going to be gone next week. Nice. Actually, the next 2 Sundays.
2 Sundays.
So we'll figure something out. It'll either be us, kind of doing it how we did last week on Skype, or depending on the situation, I might have to run the show for the next 2 weeks.
Right.
But you'll be back in perfect timing. I think it's like the week before playoffs start.
Right.
So we'll be back and we'll be fired up for the start of the playoffs. So stay tuned we'll have something for you next week again, whether it's the both of us or whether it's just me, kind of getting by.
I'll send you my thoughts though. Sure.
Yep. So we'll have talking points from Jeff. So I thought, I really enjoyed this show. I felt like we threw some different stuff in, had a lot of good talking points. So,
all right. The first live to live connection we have in
a month. Yeah.
Yep.
A month, literally like a month.
Yep.
So it's good to be back and normal in-person recording.
Right.
And as always, send us any topics you guys want us to cover, talking points, anything, that you think would be interesting or that you saw that was interesting. And we, especially if I'm by myself next week, please, for the love of God, give me something to talk about, because I discovered 2 weeks ago that it's very difficult to do a show by yourself.
Absolutely.
Way harder than I would imagine. So if, please send some talking points my way.
You did well, my guy.
Yeah. All right. So let's wrap it up. Hope you guys enjoyed, and we will catch you next week.
All right. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to What Did They Know podcast. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media outlets to see future episode details, and don't forget to send in any questions or topics that you want to see the guys discuss in their weekly episodes to come.